Well, good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. Every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock, I have the pleasure of bringing you some interesting people. And tonight, I've got a very interesting person for you. Catherine McKenna, who is an MP from Ottawa and is currently the Minister of Infrastructure. I think you've got a longer title, but I think it's Minister of Infrastructure. Yeah. Dealing with a pretty challenging time, I can imagine. So, Ms. McKenna, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Great. Happy to join.
So tell me, just off the top, what's life like as a Minister of the Crown, Minister of Infrastructure during a pandemic when we're all self-isolated, and I think you're a mom, and so you got kids as well. How do you deal with being a minister and all your other responsibilities?
Well, I'm probably like a lot of parents, not the parents who have to be out there, and there are a lot of parents who are actually working on essential services, but a lot of parents that are at home trying to balance work and also a bunch of kids. So I have 3 children. They're 15, 13, and 11. And homeschooling is something else. I have a greater appreciation for teachers.
Wow.
Look, we're all trying to do our best. And so I have taken on French because I went to a French school as a kid. So I'm doing French verbs, pretty much my least favorite thing. I've taken on sort of the making sure everyone gets exercise components. So playing basketball in our driveway and maybe a bike ride, but it's hard. And I was just talking to Minister Mulroney, and she's got a good idea. She said, because it's very annoying because it's so messy now with your children home all the time. So she has sticky notes to remind her kids to put things away. So I've taken that lesson too. Because I'm working at home, but I don't need to have the peanut butter and honey open and spilt as I'm working and getting it on my documents.
So the minister responsible for sticky notes.
For sticky notes and stickiness, apparently.
So, obviously we're in an emergency. Tell us what cabinet meetings are like. Can you say, are you having virtual Zoom cabinet meetings? What's going on there?
So we have secure lines for cabinet meetings. Sometimes some people go in for meetings. Not that I can talk about specific details about meetings, but I think that one observation I would make is that now we are absolutely 100% focused on how do we support Canadians. And so, where normally you have an agenda, it's worked on for months, you get a time when you're going to be presenting a cabinet. Now it's really, how do we respond as soon as possible in a pretty extremely fast way? And so that's a real change. It's probably a real change for the public service too.
Yeah.
But it's so important because I'm also a member of Parliament and I'm really close to my community here in Ottawa Centre. And I know we're seeing this across the country. The challenges that folks are experiencing personally in terms of being able to pay their bills is huge, but also small businesses. So we have come up with a bunch of measures very, very quickly for government speed, certainly in government speed really quickly to help support Canadians. So the new emergency response benefit, where we've had a huge number of people apply, which is good because we are finally covering contractors. And I think that was something, and people that are self-employed, and there just weren't benefits for them. And we had to create a whole new category. And that is normally in government, that doesn't happen as quickly as it does, and really thinking outside the box. Also the wage subsidies. So a lot of businesses would be looking at that to be making sure that we aren't putting people out of work and laying them off. If there's a way as a government we can support keeping these people on the payroll while we go through a very challenging time. And so those are the conversations, very real conversations we have, talking about real people and what we can do.
Can I ask you a little bit about that? So, I think that obviously this wage subsidy went over the course of a week from a 10% wage subsidy for small and medium-sized companies to 75% for all companies that could prove that the revenues were down by 30% or more. However, you have to wait a while to get that money. And in that interim time period, a lot of companies across Canada did go through fairly extensive layoffs and furloughs and work time reductions, et cetera. Just this week or a day or two ago, Air Canada announced they were going to try to hire people back that had been laid off and use the wage subsidy for it. Do you think companies will rehire laid off workers or forestall laying off workers and make use of this wage subsidy? And is the government doing anything proactively to try to persuade companies to do so?
Well, I mean, I guess stepping back, you're right. We started off with a 10% wage subsidy and we had to adjust. And I think that's what you have to do in a time of crisis where things are evolving very quickly. And we got a lot of feedback. I was able to provide personal feedback from businesses I spoke to, but I know members of parliament across country were doing that. And I think that's important. We have to, it's not going to be perfect. And if we don't get it, we got to go back to the drawing board and, take another stab at it. It was good to see Air Canada is going to rehire folks. I do hope. I know a number of businesses had been waiting to, because I think we're going to try to look at this, and so a number of businesses will benefit from it. But getting it out as quickly as possible is going to be really important, because I know I've spent a lot of time talking to small businesses. They don't have a lot of cash on hand. Many of them have no money coming in or greatly reduced revenues, and so. I'm certainly hopeful, because obviously the goal is to keep people off the new benefit from being laid off and keep them on the payroll so that we can keep these, businesses, as whole as possible during the next few months. And then there'll be a recovery at a certain point, and we want them to be part of the recovery. But I think we're just going to have to adjust. We've actually announced different measures as to how we will quantify whether businesses qualify, which I think is really important. We've heard from people that get paid in different ways. It's seasonal sometimes. And so I think, we're going to have to be really creative, and we're working really hard. And as I say, it's not going to be perfect and there will be challenges, but we are trying to do absolutely everything we can. I mean, the Prime Minister said we've got Canadians back, and it's just figuring out what tools do we have and how do we adjust them.
Let's talk about the recovery. I've had a couple of different economists and money managers on my show, and they're very negative in regards to how bad the economy is going to be. And they're saying that we're going to have sort of the mother of all fiscal stimulus plans to get the recovery going. And a lot of them have said that your portfolio is going to be one of the most important, that it's going to be infrastructure spending. Have we started thinking, has the Canadian government started thinking about massive new infrastructure programs? And, what do you want to see? Are we going to be building railways and subways and high-speed trains that we wouldn't have been able to afford and justify before?
So that's a really good question. That certainly, I mean, immediately right now, it's a little hard to tell where we're going to be, but we're certainly going to be in a tough spot. We've seen the unemployment numbers, they're high, but I think we expect that they're going to be a lot higher, and it's going to depend on how long we're able to the curve and start the recovery. But infrastructure is critical to kickstart. We know that. So I'm already taking measures right now to speed up. We have a very large infrastructure program. So I am looking at how do we speed up that process? How do we get projects like community and rec centers that are coming in? How do we, make it more quick, our approval process, so that shovels are in the ground this construction season? But I have also, been talking to folks like the Obama folks, people actually who have worked on Canada's recovery in 08, 09, when we had a recession where infrastructure played a really important role, Canada, US, around the world, and really thinking strategically about if we get to the point where we need to do that, what are we going to do? I mean, how do you, one, get shovels in the ground quickly? Like, it's sometimes very long lead times for projects. So we need to figure out what are the projects that are really going to get people working. And so that's a piece of it. But I think we also always need to be thinking about what are the big game-changing transformational opportunities that we have. We know we need better public transit, and the Ford government has been really ambitious in what they want to see in public transit. And so I think, there's real opportunities there. In terms of the green economy, we could do massive retrofit programs. And we have an infrastructure bank. So I don't know if you know much about this, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and it's really intended to bring in the private sector, to bring in institutional investors, the capital. There's a lot of capital out there. So we have huge infrastructure needs and opportunities, but we are going to need the private sector as well to be part of that. And so I think there's some real opportunities there. But I am definitely thinking about that in my portfolio. There's some thought going in. It's just hard to know the quantum, but really figuring out how do we get people in jobs right away? Yeah. And then how do we do big things? As you said, public transit's got to be part of it. We know there's opportunities in renewable energy. There's opportunities to, maybe it's hospitals. I mean, we've seen the huge need. So I think we're going to have to take some time but when it's the right time, I think that there's going to be an opportunity to really get people working on big construction projects that'll create jobs right away. But are the Canada's longer term competitiveness is going to depend on this as well.
So I had a architect on my show that said that the Liberal Party in 2009 had major criticism for the then Harper government's infrastructure policies because the focus was all on things that were shovel ready, and the only things that were shovel ready were the things that were less game changing, to use sort of the terminology, and the things that were really game changing took longer. And she said that what we really should have is people in your department reaching out to people saying, plan now while we're all at home, and people can do the design work, so that in the fall, when you come out with this big infrastructure plan that's all shovel ready, we actually have the game changers. So are there things that we can be doing now in anticipation of needing shovel ready projects in a few months when we all can go back to work?
So, I mean, the reality is, look, I think there were some good criticisms of what the Conservatives did. I'm also willing to say that I think they did some things right. Like, the reality is you do need to have jobs right away. And that might not be your game-changing projects. It might be like, retrofitting or renovating a community center. It might be natural infrastructure. We got a lot of problems with flooding. So I think you gotta be realistic in the short term. What is gonna create jobs? Because some of these major projects, they require, like, I could tell people tomorrow, go do them. It's still gonna take years before you get to the point that they're gonna be ready. You need to do both. Certainly, I think your focus, as I say, I talked to the Obama folks, their focus was, what are the short-term jobs, stimulus, projects? And then what are the longer game-changing things that we need to do to position ourselves? And I think you need to do both. We have a bunch of projects coming in from provinces. I am looking at really pushing internally to look at what are the lessons learned that the Conservatives did well, which was really streamlining the process. Like, I think now is not the time. You have to be mindful of taxpayer dollars. Absolutely. I'm someone who is actually a fiscal conservative. People might not know this, but we got to be very mindful of taxpayer dollars, but we got to be faster because you need these projects. And then really positioning ourselves with the infrastructure bank. So we have this we have the new chair, Michael Sabia, incoming chair. He's coming from the Caisse de dépôt in Quebec. He has a lot of experience with major projects, including major public transit projects. So really brainstorming there. So you have to do both. Like, I think you can't, I'm not going to criticize the Conservatives for getting shovels in the ground. People need jobs. Yeah. But we do need to look long-term. Where do we want to be? And we need broadband. What I haven't talked about is, like, you realize now in the situation where we're all at home, we're lucky enough to have high-speed broadband so we can talk like this. There are a lot of Canadians that don't.
Right.
That isn't just a productivity issue, which certainly is, because you can't be as productive. It's an equity issue. So we need to accelerate that. And I think these are the opportunities that, that we're looking at. How do we do things that are going to improve the quality of life for Canadians?
Let me ask you one last question. Having to do a little bit, but your prior portfolio is Ministry of the Environment. One of the things that I've been really encouraged by in this pandemic is that politicians across the world have finally been listening to scientists. Do you think that actually is going to change people's attitude toward climate change?
Well, hope springs eternal. Look, a lot of Canadians support climate action and believe in science and scientists. But I think you've definitely seen that, yes. And it's certainly been our government's approach. It's like, listen to scientists when it comes to, what measures we need to take to protect Canadians' health. And it's the same thing with climate change. I mean, just listen to the scientists. Talk about the science behind climate change. But look, I think in general, Canadians support climate action. We saw that in the last election. But it's also an economic opportunity to position ourselves. I don't care, to be honest, why people support climate action. I just care that they support it, because we need to take action, but there's a clear economic case, because the future is going to look really different than what we've got right now. And that's good. It'll be healthier for us. It'll be better for our environment. It'll create new economic opportunities. And Canada's well positioned. We have amazing entrepreneurs. We have huge natural resources needed for the economy of the future. So the good news is that I am also thinking about that piece in my portfolio, and now I have money. So you can invest in infrastructure for the future that is consistent with moving forward in a cleaner, more sustainable way too.
Well, Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure, thank you very much for joining us on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Do you have a final message for Canadians before we say goodbye?
Well, do listen to our health professionals, our chief medical officers. Follow their advice, because we will get out of this sooner. It's really a choice. And I think that we've put out some modeling, and it's just saying what could happen. And I think it's up to us. And so it's up to us to make sure we're doing everything we can to follow the advice and keep people safe. And it's not just about us personally, it's about everyone else that has to work. And there's so many people that are working there. But look, I am so proud to be Canadian, and I know Canadians that we get it, and everyone's going to step up, and we're going to come through this stronger. But it's hard, and I recognize it's really hard for folks right now. So just stay hopeful. It's a time of hope. It's Easter, so renewal. Time of Passover. So we will, we got to work hard on this. Listen to our experts, and we will get through stronger.
We will overcome. Thank you very much, Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure.